This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A14, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Peggy Gilgis, Jesse Warren, Ann Johnson, Margaret Eldridge, Monty Harris, Sage Bradburn, Victoria Walsh. We're expecting Navarre Bartz to join us shortly, and probably Betsy Soulsby is also on this call. The opportunities for the public to access the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County website, on the Board of Supervisors homepage, and on the Albemarle County calendar. Okay. So Christine unfortunately can't be here today. She is in Tucson, Arizona, visiting her father, and she called me earlier today, so she wasn't going to be able to make the call. So we can get started. We want to welcome our new members who are here. Sage Bradburn, who recently joined us, but this is her first meeting with us as an official member of the committee. And Sage, last meeting we had Victoria Walsh join us for her first meeting, and we wanted to know if you'd like to introduce yourself, say a few words. Well, we need to take your mute off.
Okay. Thanks. I'm really glad to be here with you all in an official capacity. I've lived in Charlottesville for most of the last 30 years and some before that, and I've been looking for a way to get involved in environmental stewardship and action in my community. And I was just really delighted when I ran into Terry Kent at the store and said, this is what I'm looking for. And she suggested this committee. So thank you, Terry. And I'm really glad to be here with you all today.
We're really happy to have you. And our second new member is Betsy Soulsby, who we all know for her long work with us as an ambassador in the recycling program. And Betsy, very happy to have you officially join the SWAC. And would you like to say anything?
Well, thank you. And yeah, you already know me, so I'm glad to be official now.
Okay.
We can say for any new members that don't know that Betsy is the one who runs the electronics recycling out of her dentist's office. So that's been a great help for the community in electronics recycling. So I had to throw that in.
Yes, it's a huge compliment to what we can do at Ravenna Solid Waste Authority. And Betsy, when is your next drive for electronics?
It's February 18th. It's a Friday morning, 7:15 a.m. till noon. And we take lots more, anything electricity goes through, except for major appliances.
Yeah, that's great. So Ravenna doesn't take toasters and broken CD players and that sort of thing, but Betsy's operation will do that. Thank you very much, Betsy. I realize I just went running ahead with the agenda, and I should ask if anyone has any changes they would like to make to the agenda. Otherwise, we can vote to approve it and move ahead. Anybody have anything they would like to add or see changed? Then let's all who approve, let's see a show of hands. I think I can see most hands. Oh, nope, a lot of people aren't on video. So hi, Margaret, I see you. All right, I'm assuming, oh, there we go. I see some other raised hands. Okay, thanks, Anne. See yours. Okay. All right.
Chuck just joined. So
what's that?
Chuck just joined.
Oh, hey, Chuck. As you all know, Chuck Riegel agreed to be with us today to talk about his work and what he sees around the United States with specifically with bottle deposits and returns. But Chuck, if you're ready to go, we can have you start. He'll fill us in about what TOMRA is and what he does for TOMRA and what's going on around the nation, and maybe prospects for Virginia with Bottle Bill. Ready when you are, Chuck.
Good. Okay. I hope the weak signal's not on my end. I've got a slide deck to sort of help us talk through this. I always like visuals, and it helps me, and I think it might make the conversation a little bit more interesting. So let me see if I can share my screen. It's nice to be back. Thank you for the invitation. All right, let's see what we got here. All right. So you all can see this, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. I won't ask so many questions, but there we go. So it was pretty open agenda. I appreciate the ability to talk about the deposit return programs. Actually, I might broaden it a little bit, since there are some really good related policies around recycled content and EPR that are also being promoted. But like you suggested there, Peggy, I'll give a little introduction about TOMRA. I know I probably don't know everybody here on the committee, but I know a number of folks have sort of know where I work, and maybe a little bit about what I do. But let's get started. I'll try to get through this. I'm happy with interruptions, although I have a hard time presenting and seeing the hands getting raised. So I will try to answer questions towards the end for sure. So just a little bit about TOMRA, and I've been with the company for 21 years now. Before I came to TOMRA, I was a solid waste recycling manager for a city in Connecticut, Norwalk, Connecticut, and for about 10 years of setting up curbside municipal recycling programs. So when I went over to TOMRA, I actually started off as their sustainability manager, and we eventually just created the role of government affairs. And so I've worked in this space for over 30 years. The company has evolved from really starting off as creating a technology for bottle returns in grocery stores for refillables. When I joined, that's what we basically focused on those markets. But soon we expanded to include other technologies that serve other sectors. The closest is actually in sorting. So on curbside programs, where they have the optical sorting technology to unscramble a single stream, that's what we see. Plus also improving the quality of the material so that it actually can end up being used for remanufacturing. We also have optical sorting technology in the mining sector, identifying, let's say, a diamond out of a big pile of rocks. Rather than having to crush all the rocks and find the diamonds, we're actually able to find them in a larger state, and that adds value for the customers there. And food sorting. We make those avocados all come out the same size in the bag. Blueberries, looking for quality control, and tomatoes and potatoes. I do my work primarily in really on the recycling circular economy space. We have, TOMRA has about 4 decades of experience. I think actually we're coming up on our 50th anniversary, so we'll change that to 5. Working in all the countries that have deposit systems in some way, whether it's providing the technology in the stores, or it's actually in doing pickup and processing material recovery. And we work in all those markets. So before I get to me for a second here, this is just the visual here of a plant. This is a MRF, the largest MRF in the country in New York City. And you can see those sort of orange-sized coffins are optical sorting technology spread throughout the process.
Chuck,
yes.
Chuck, can I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
Slides,
We're still seeing your very first slide. The slide deck's not progressing.
You are screen sharing. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure. Is it that
We
you
still
think
see the
it's
slide with like the 4 squares, and we'll
You
discuss
have to go to-
introduction. Oh, there you go. Now you're there. Yep.
But it
Thanks.
also shows your notes, so you may want to go to slideshow presentation.
I thought I was on slideshow presentation. This thing's a little
But
slow
we're seeing
today.
your notes over there.
All right. Well, I'm not even reading from them, so let's. I didn't even know they were there. All right, let's see how we might get rid of this.
Notes are okay. Sometimes they help. I kind of like them.
All right. Well, maybe you could bear with me on that. Are we at least caught up? So you missed a few of the slides beforehand?
Yeah,
Yes,
Okay.
we're on, we're not seeing the mirth yet, but we're seeing the circular economy slide.
Okay. All right. This I talked about sort of the breaking up on our company business, being in multiple markets. And here we go with the MRF. You can see the MRF slide now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe there's a little bit of a delay. But anyway, to the point here, this is the MRF that does the processing for New York City single stream. Actually, it's a dual stream program. They do keep their fiber, their paper separated. All right. Do you see the what do I just want to get to see what I do slide? Okay. All right. Thanks. Hopefully, I don't have to do that again, but please interrupt. So I'm responsible for our government affairs, our external relations, our public affairs outreach for the Americas. Predominantly, my work's in the U.S. and Canada. Me and my team, my network we're working on influencing legislation right now. We're spending much of our time trying to modernize deposit systems that exist, as well as looking for opportunities for new deposit laws. Primarily, the focus is almost every deposit market right now is considering how to update its program, but there are a few states looking into this. And what we're looking to do is basically, so how can we design the system for the next couple decades? So what was the deposit system 50 years ago is much more mature now, and we need to figure out ways to include all containers and make the program easy and accessible for all consumers. I work on making sure we have system integrity with all the stakeholders, the beverage companies, the retailers, regulators that are involved. And finally, also, we've expanded our scope to include a lot more on what we call circular economy policy, so recycled content, legislation, the EPR for curbside, so that's EPR financing for curbside programs around packaging, et cetera. So these are slides that are ideas that I'll even use internally, but we're trying to talk about sort of, well, what makes these last couple years and a few years going ahead relevant and exciting for recycling policy. You all know there are times when as far as environmental policy goes, or even just how public policy goes, recycling isn't always top of mind, but it's really moved up in the charts and priorities for policymakers these last few years. And that's because of things that you're familiar with, public concern around ocean plastics and littering, the rising costs of recycling collection, and the fact that having options like what China put up about forcing us to focus on material quality. Topics like zero waste and even environmental justice have to be considered now with this. And as I got sort of a primer, we still have a strong interest in glass recycling in Charlottesville. Well, that's an issue for a lot of communities across the country on how to deal with that and whether to remove it from recycling programs or find alternative ways to deal with that. And what was actually made very apparent during COVID was the supply chain issue. So I actually had a lot of work to do when COVID hit in trying to make sure the bottle rooms stayed open. So, and our recycling operations stayed open, because the packaging manufacturers noticed very quickly that the supply chain had been disrupted as consumers changed habits, but as just buildings were closed. And in order for them to continue to provide their products on the shelves, which consumers still needed, they were making a big political effort and joined us on the fight to get the deposit programs, especially, up and running again. And there's also been a fair amount of public pressure on the trade, and this is probably I don't know, say maybe one of the more effective ways to get the brand owners that own the package or that put it out on the marketplace to consider taking responsibility for it, and in a lot of ways supporting these producer responsibility bills. Now, they still want to support it in ways that work for them, but we find that we're having a lot more discussion with the brands on how to design high-performing programs, especially as they're getting called out as polluters. And you may have seen this kind of chart. This is an Ellen MacArthur Foundation put together this chart a number of years ago, and it started getting people thinking around, what does a circular economy mean? And so how are we? And this has led to thinking around, how does what are the benefits of recycled content policy, or how are we going to actually reduce, when we have concepts around zero waste, well, what's one way of reducing the production of new virgin? And that's actually getting the material we have out of the system today and keeping it going full loop. The focus has been a lot on plastics, and you see a lot of the but I did tell you the aluminum can manufacturers, the glass manufacturers are also very much engaged in this. Not in just, want to maybe promote a sustainable alternative, but they also want to make sure that their products, the alternative to plastics, but they want to make sure that their products are also sustainable going forward. This chart is sort of a follow-up the Ellen MacArthur Foundation did as it engaged a number of consumers and working groups, and put a challenge to them by suggesting that, now that they had made commitments, voluntary commitments outside of statute, their performance needs to be, or is being measured. And we've seen public commitments before, at least, in my 30 years working on this. There've been 2 or 3 times where public commitments are made. That's probably how Ann and I met on the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, was a previous round of public commitments around recycled content. But the fact that they're being monitored and there are groups willing to spend time to measure performance versus promise is actually keeping the debate honest and active, which may be good for eventually getting these promises or commitments memorialized in statutes. It's going to be a little hard. Maybe it's not hard to read on your screen, but this was a map put together by the Ball Container, and they were. These are not state recycling rates. These are actually recovery rates for beverage containers. So not all packaging. And this is the kind of, to your point about, the state of beverage container recovery. I mean, this is what a lot of markets are looking at today and seeing that they've actually got, it's quite low. Even if they've got curbside recycling, the results are pretty poor. But the states that actually have deposit return, the numbers are better. The Northeast is still showing some low figures, and that's why we're having the conversations today about modernizing those programs by raising the deposit value. And that 40% recovery in Michigan number is very reflective of their deposit program because they've got a very low small infrastructure for at the curbside. So there's still, maybe another way to take this, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of material out there that's being left on the table that we can recover. So I'll jump into a little bit more specifics about public policy in Europe. My company is global. Most of my colleagues are actually in Europe working on similar policy in the countries there. I have some colleagues in Asia, but there's a lot of activity going on in Europe, and it was it really set in motion when the EU established or updated its waste directive. So we're on the SWAC committee, we always talk about whether we'd be able to set targets around recycling, how could we mandate that? Well, the EU not only has targets on all packaging recovery, which is then applied to every country or member state. It updated those just a couple years ago, but it also included the first time ever a target for the recovery of single-use plastic beverage containers. Now, it's not that they didn't want to have focus on aluminum cans or glass containers. Glass actually has a good recovery rate, but it was the plastic containers that were under big scrutiny. And as a result, the only way countries are going to really able to comply with a 90% recovery target is to implement deposit return. So whereas you had a number of countries that did have it, almost every EU state, except maybe 2, have made an announcement that they're going to implement a deposit return program for their beverage containers. And just to add here, the Basel Convention is just another extension of the focus around plastics and not wanting countries realizing that they were not only challenged by China raising the quality standards, that whole concept of shipping their waste to other countries and having to become their waste disposal problem was unethical. And so we saw by signing on to the Basel Convention, it really sort of closes the door and forcing each country to address waste, and that's why you see a big sharp increase in public policy adoption. When I talk about deposit return programs or bottle bills, we're talking about I think probably the most public or most obvious or clear sort of association with them is applying a deposit and returning containers. They are complex programs. It's not as simple as just dropping a container off and having a bin. We're talking about integrating producer responsibility, retailer participation. There's financing required. There's transparency and expectations, setting targets. So I've been spending a lot of my time over the last couple of years actually promoting what we consider sort of the key principles around designing high-performing deposit systems. And these are the attributes that we see in the programs that we work with in Europe, like Norway, Germany, the programs in a state like Michigan or Oregon. And how can we bring those lessons learned, best practices to the other markets and new greenfield states? So if we were to be talking about a bottle bill for Virginia, these are the kind of, this is the sort of starting point principles that I'd want to have stakeholders consider first before we start getting into the details of the program. Just in general, I'm probably going to pivot now into just the last few slides, just so you can see something in the U.S. As far as sort of where these policies are hitting as for the debates. But if we were to say what are the top public policy instruments that are being promoted, and we're talking about the banning of single-use plastics, which is I sort of find is sort of an entryway that's very acceptable to a lot of stakeholders, and sort of a good entry point on getting into more complex policy. We've got extended producer responsibility for packaging, and that's really going to be mostly focused on curbside programs and recycled content minimums, as well as bottle bills. So the first slide here is states, and just real quickly, you get a sense for what almost every one of those, I think all the states that are colored in blue, plus the red one with Iowa, in the US are all deposit states. In Canada, there's actually deposit on refillable beers, so the whole country has deposit, but the big provinces there have deposit on one-way containers. That said, almost every one of them is considering at some level updating or reforming its program, right? Whether it's raising the deposit, whether it's expanding to include new containers, or addressing what kind of infrastructure they're offering to the consumers to make redemption easy. There are a couple states that I've seen some deposit policy submitted. Virginia is one of them. Obviously, that's going to be a little bit, well, my experience is it's going to be challenged when we have a split government. We have at least a chamber of the three is of a different political party. That makes things difficult, but in just today's day of polarization. But in a state like Washington, where EPR is also being considered, the bottle bill will be part of that debate at some point. There is a federal bill being considered. I'm not sure it's going to get much traction on a campaign-wise. What we're really hoping is that they actually produce just a well-drafted bill that might be a model for other states. Add a little bit of a layer here, and we've got some consideration around EPR for packaging. And we saw two bills this year, one in Oregon and one in Maine, that passed and did a lot of primarily focusing on how to finance the curbside collection programs by producers, no longer by the municipalities, with some additional language that might try to improve the quality or the focus around quality and measuring true recycling, not measuring collection, but actually measuring what gets actually through to the end users, the end manufacturers. But I expect we'll see a bill in Washington State in January, and that debate will continue. And probably the final slide here I just wanted to talk about again was recycled content. This bill can come up in two forms. One could be around beverage containers only. The probably more comprehensive bill would be to include all plastics. And we saw an all plastics bill pass in Washington State. We saw California add beverage containers to its already all plastic or all plastics minus beverage containers law. And I believe New Jersey is currently debating recycled content legislation. I got a notice just this morning that it's being heard in committee. So this is sort of the push-pull strategy. One of the challenges with recycling PET has been that the value of it decreases has its ups and downs tied in with the price of oil. It's very difficult for recycling programs to plan around that. So having recycled content, creating a demand a different way decouples the economics. Pricing for glass is just fairly steady year after year. And pricing for aluminum is a supply and demand, but not tied in with an extraordinary event like the price of oil. So it's they're just in summary. There's some exciting times going on with public policy in this space. And like I said, I think it's we're not just going to be holding our breath year after year to see if we can get something going. I think we've got a few years here, really a good window here to work on advancing recycling in this country. So I'll stop there if that's helpful, and answer questions or touch upon things that maybe I missed.
That was very helpful, Chuck. Thank you very much. And I neglected to mention that Chuck is an alumni of the SWAC. He was with us for several years from the beginning in 2016. So if people have questions, Liz Palmer has a question.
I have a couple. Thanks. And I was going to also say that Chuck was part of the committee for quite a while and was very helpful when we were actually designing and trying to figure out what we were going to do with the IV transfer station. So anyway, and it's kind of amazing that somebody works for Tomra that just lives right out in Albemarle County. Chuck, you mentioned that in Europe, they're putting deposit bills on single-use plastic. What do they do with the single-use plastic if they collect it? Are they burning it, or how are they recycling it?
Oh, I'll tell you, I'm not aware of any deposit program that does anything other than move the material it collects to its highest and best use. So the PET is all going to end users for new products.
Oh.
Europe has a little bit of a higher, I don't know if it's a higher standard, but whereas the US allows food grade, so containers that were once used for food to go back into food grade production. In Europe, they haven't. I think they're trying to adjust that, or are in the process of adjusting that for beverage containers, because they also have, along with the mandate to recover, they also have these. They're putting in mandates around recycled content, and so yeah, no, there's high demand, not just for the PET containers, but polypropylene, the polyolefins, HDPE, PE, PP containers, and to the point where industries, we just built a test facility in Germany that's processing through mixed waste, just still trying to get the remaining plastic containers out of it so that those companies can reuse it in their production. So yeah, nothing. We don't landfill glass, aluminum, or PE, or any of the plastic containers we collect. I'm only familiar. I say there is a problem with aseptic packaging still in some markets that they get collected, and they're in the deposit program in Australia, but they're getting collected, but not much of no home for them.
We've just had such a problem here getting rid of anything but ones and twos, and so I'm assuming that the single-use plastic is. I mean, here it's sometimes a variety of different types of plastic. So I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Hey, Chuck, thanks for the presentation. It was awesome. And I want to talk to you about doing it in front of the Plastic Waste Advisory Council for the state of Virginia, which I'm the chairman of. But Liz, one of the things that you have in Europe is not just incentivized to collect packaging and use recycled content, you have disincentives to landfill. So there are landfill taxes. So in addition to tipping fees, there are landfill taxes, and you cannot dispose of anything unless it's been treated in many markets. So they've got both the disincentive and the incentive structure. And so the UK single-use plastic tax requires 30% recycled content, and there is a massive per ton tax on it if you don't meet the recycled content. And then, Chuck, you probably know more about this, but the new resource tax, that if you can't demonstrate it's going to somewhere positive, there's a per ton, it's like 800 euro tax per ton if you actually are going to dispose of material. So they make it incredibly expensive to actually landfill anything.
Huh. Well, thank you very much. I have one other, well, I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'm just going to ask one more and then let other people ask questions. Chuck, you showed the MRF in New York City, and it appeared as though I think you said that they're mixing glass in with everything. How well are they getting the glass out of that facility? Or did I get that wrong?
No, the glass is part of their single stream facility. It's still a challenge. That MRF operator Sims is I mean, they're one of the better, let's just say, at what they do. They do have their own glass beneficiating operation, so they're tied in with the next step. And making sure that they can take the material that they've got, no matter how contaminated. New York has a deposit law, so a lot of glass is removed that way, but not all of it. And by actually keeping the fiber separate, they've avoided contamination of that material. So it's sort of, there's with glass, there's sort of two things. It's one, it's trying to get the glass recovered, but it's also the damage it creates for the other materials.
They pull all that glass out right at the front end of the MRF.
Yeah.
And they have they have an integrated glass plant just across the river in Jersey City, and it's large.
Yeah.
And so they don't mix the paper in with that. When you say single stream, apparently they don't do that.
It's actually a dual stream. There's no paper at the big Sims MRF. Paper is collected separately in New York.
Okay, thank you.
I had a few questions. Can you hear me? One question, and I was curious about this, the disincentives. Who pays for the disincentives? So, like, I mean, if you're dumping, I mean, would that be the municipality, or what? Who pays that cost?
Anybody who's disposing. It could be companies. It could be private citizens. They make it very expensive to dispose.
Oh, really? So even private citizens, like any of us, we'd be thinking about what we were putting in the trash. Interesting. And then, go ahead.
I was going to say it's like 80, 90 euros, or it's now in pounds. I don't know what it is to landfill, but then there's $120 or 120 euro landfill tax on top of it.
Interesting. And then is there, I was like, I guess it was Liz. I was curious about, we have so many different kinds of plastics, like, I mean, do they have the same range, 1, 2s, 5, 7s, or is it which complicates our recycling efforts. Do they have as many different kinds of plastics, or is it a narrower range?
Yes, they have the exact same mix. And in fact, they have more complicated, and that they use more flexible packaging in Europe than we do here. So obviously that does not get covered by a container deposit legislation. And so I think Chuck was mentioning aseptics are challenging. Films and flexibles are also challenging in Europe, and do often end up, in lower, they do get recycled some, but they often end up in waste energy facilities.
Okay, I have 2 more questions. One question, is there any, like in Virginia or in the US, is there anyone or any agency that assesses the quality of recycling? Because Chuck, you mentioned that, there's one thing about, it's different, what you put in the bin versus what is actually gets, is actually recyclable or gets to the agent that can recycle. So is that, I mean, is that anything that is being assessed at facilities in the US? I always wonder when I put things in the recycling bin, is this being used, or is it just going to a different, is it being recycled at all? Is that tracked at all? I know this is a very novice question, but.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead first.
I was going to say there's the packaging, whatever the material side of it is, and then there's the system, the infrastructure side. Yeah. And, so the problem is the infrastructure is highly variable across the US.
Right.
And so you could have something that's really recyclable in one system, and it's not so much because we do things differently in Albemarle County. So it's a complex question, But the answer is yes, there's a huge amount of work, and you have pretty strong design guidance from, most of the major commodity producers, trade groups on packaging about what is best practice to ensure it has the best likelihood of getting through the system.
Okay, I guess I was wondering if is anyone tracking it? Like if we wanted to know what the Ravenna Waste Management, if it was actually recycling what, proportion of materials it was receiving, is that tracked?
I'll jump in here really quick. And we can go over this in more detail another time, but the TJPDC does a regional solid waste plan and takes information from haulers directly. So nobody's checking them. They're just taking them by their word. And then they report that out to make sure that we make the minimum. And with respect to locally here, basically, if you're not using the Ravenna Solid Waste Authority's infrastructure, you have no idea how much is actually getting recycled.
Okay. And this is my last question. I'll make it
Oh,
short.
Sage,
Yes.
do you mind if I sort of want to get two things in here? Just there's, because we're thinking about policy, and it's a really good question what you've asked about measurement. And this is, I think, what got us, if you look at sort of what got us into trouble with China, why are we accepting even a low recycling rate as acceptable? But what we're really measuring is the collection rate. When we measure what comes out of trucks or what goes into the MRFs. And we're not measuring the recycling rate. The recycling happens after the MRFs as it's going into or at the manufacturer. So your point about who's watching it, the answer really is it's happening, but the measurements, that transparency is not there. That data is not strong. And I think that's why we have the allowance for high contamination and single stream programs, or because we're throwing away this material. This is the glass is one of the perfect things. So that discussion of how to maybe possibly redefine what recycling is or how to remeasure it needs to happen. It's happening in the EU right now. I think it's starting in the public or in the stakeholder discussions here, and that we're going to see the numbers drop, and as a result. But then we'll actually have a true measurement of the program's performance. And when you understand that, then you can fix it. You can make adjustments. You can invest in it. The same points are a little bit with around what you talked about packaging and the EU being different. In the same case will be here in the US and Canada is when we start adding these EPR laws and put producers responsible for their packaging. What that means is they actually have to pay for its recovery, its collection and recycling. And will they make the decisions? Has this kind of policy been effective for them to make the decisions to use material that is able to get recycled, to choose those types of packaging, to design for recycling? That's I would say that's a little bit more hardcore topics here, but I think that talks to your questions a bit, which are good ones.
Okay, and if I could ask just one more, because as you address this, like in Virginia with our new governor, things are not looking so good. Is there, since you're at a company that works, has operations across the globe, have you seen any strategies that might be effective addressing more, politically and conservative policymakers or constituencies, since, this is what we'd be working with or what we're facing?
It's a good question, and it is a challenge. And with politics, if you can find groups like in Tennessee, the primary environmental organization that's pushing for this is a hook and bullet organization, Tennessee Wildlife Federation, of which connects with a lot of the constituency there, political policymakers, legislators, or let's say members. They can make those they're connected with those activities. And so when they made, and this is how the bill passed in Michigan. This actually a number of the bottle bills, the original EPR policies in the states passed, were signed off by Republican administrations. And there was a connection made at the time, and litter is not a partisan concern. Wasting shouldn't be, but if we can, we try other arguments like jobs, the economic development associated with them. So if we can make this less around a party or a special interest groups, only kind of a thing, and show that I think recycling is one of those should cut across party lines. And then we can just get down to whether a politician believes that a mandate or a regulation is necessary and not looked at as a stick, but more of this is how we can create a common marketplace. And these are sort of the key drivers we need. I don't know, I haven't had a lot of success with that, but that's, we do have, we do make those arguments so that we can make it relevant. And we do work in states that have, like I said, had passed these laws originally under Republican administrations.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chuck, thank you very much. We've already had you
Welcome.
for about 45 minutes, and I actually don't see any other hands raised, but I hope we can have you come back again, and because you have so much to share with us, and it's very educational.
Can I
That's my
ask
pleasure.
before, since nobody else has their hand up? I'm really curious, Chuck, you said that COVID made people more interested in bottle bills, and I'm having a hard time making that connection. I wouldn't
say the public. The public was scared of a lot of things. These were actually, what I meant if I said people was the trade associations, the trade. So the manufacturers of glass bottles, the manufacturers of plastic containers, aluminum cans. So the ones that needed to put those beverages back on the shelves, or along with other products, it was the supply chain concerns. These are the ones that may have not been quiet because for whatever reasons, whether their brand owners didn't want them to be promoting this kind of producer responsibility, but when push came to shove and they were realizing that they were not going to have the supply to make their new products, that was the big thing, is the economics really proved out.
Great, thank you very much. And I have one thing just to say about trying to tie economic development with recycling locally. Boy, have I tried to do that. It's just not sexy. So I tried it with Democrats and I failed.
Right.
Maybe that was my delivery, but anyway, but thank you very, very much. It's great to see you. And
yeah, same here. Glad this worked out. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay.
Chuck, I wonder if you would share your slides with the committee.
Sure.
Could I post them for the committee afterward? Your slides?
Yep, let me just give them a quick scan.
Yeah. And one last question. U.S. is not party to the Basel Convention, are we, on exporting plastic waste?
No, I think I worked on getting California to sign on, a group of other stakeholders leading, but we signed our name, but no, not the country. Not the, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again. It was great to see you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Oh gosh, Chuck has so much information to share about the recycling markets, like Ann does. And we've used up a lot of time, which we could have had him talk for another hour, I'm sure, and we would have all learned a lot. But let's move on to our action items. We need to approve our November minutes. Christine did a great job on those, with all the information about Andrea Trimble's visit and all the links there with all the information she provided to our committee last month. And if I could get it, did anyone see anything that needed changes? If not, could I get someone to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Thank you,
I'll
Margaret. And
second it.
thank you, Anne. Very good. If I'll approve then. Thank you. Some of these are old action items that are still kind of pending, such as dumping, Christine's blog about curbside recycling with C3. I know she's working on that. I think she has a final draft that she's gonna be polishing. And Anne, this brings us to you. I'd love to hear about the advisory council's most recent meeting and your report, your November 1st report, and whether there's a link to read that.
I think it is published. I'm not sure. I can double check, and if it is, I'll share that with you. So that last meeting was a good one. You know, we spent the whole time going through and finalizing the report. It was really, really hard. There were a number of very interesting sort of environmental advocates in the back of the room for the whole process that were extremely disappointed that we did not promote a bag ban. But as you know, we have the bag tax, which has never actually gone into effect yet. So, you know, the advisory committee made a bunch of recommendations on how to improve that and facilitate the adoption of it, and then metrics for evaluating its effectiveness. And one of the things that was shared with, you know, some reports were shared both out of Europe and other places, is that a bag ban tends to have the unintended consequence of shifting bag purchases, because there's a lot of bags that are used for other things like, you know, cat litter and trash bags. So actually what you see is a growth in the sale of trash bags when you have a bag ban. So there's a little bit of this unintended consequence that really reduces the impact, the overall impact. So that was some interesting discussion, but the real work is going to start this winter. We're going to have our next report in, and as Chuck alluded to, I think the change in administration is probably going to dim the outlook for the policy recommendations of the advisory council, as opposed to the task force that's working on waste and diversion issues. Ours is a policy committee, and I think bottle bills are very high on our list, and EPR. So we're going to be doing some policy education this winter, and then we're going to have to submit our report pretty early in the fall next year. Even though the committee's tenure is through June 2023, I think the last report has to be in by the end of the session next fall. So it'll be really interesting to see what the group comes up with. This next piece is going to be all around circular economy. And I think I shared before that the level of data in Virginia is really poor. You know, we don't have recycling rates by commodity stream, let alone by form. So, you know, a lot of our recommendations was for a statewide waste characterization study that would really try to hone in both on waste composition and find out how much plastic is actually just going to landfill, and then try to better understand how much is actually being collected, and change some of the rules around MRFs and reporting requirements, because they're really, to, I think, the point Sage brought back, there is a big disconnect in understanding what is actually being processed through a MRF, let alone where it's going. So I would say those are kind of the top highlights of that.
That's interesting. Will you try to find for us a link to the November 1st report
Sure.
and share it with SWAC? That would be great. Okay. Chuck was our guest this month, and Jay Zook of GFL will be with us next month to discuss questions about GFL and the glass recycling, or the fact that they're not accepting glass actually, and whether they would help us promote glass recycling through Ravenna Solid Waste Authority, and Jesse's initiative, the OPS initiative that Phil and Jesse are working on. Last month, we touched on the Ravenna Solid Waste Special Collection Days for the Amnesty and Household Hazardous Waste and E-Waste Days. And we had considered, Donna had asked for estimates of what it would cost to add additional days. And then I believe we left it as an action item that Donna, you and Liz and Phil would talk about the idea some more. It was going to be fairly expensive, I think.
Yeah, it is. And so Supervisor Palmer, Mr. McCallops, and I have engaged in some telephonic and then some email communications. And I think there were three cost aspects of it. And I don't mean that purely in a financial, although it does have a financial cost. One of the costs is the additional work hours that are required by people at the IV Materials Utilization Center in order to hold these events, which is significant given the number of people that are required to put one into effect. There's also additional expense in terms of actually disposing of the materials that are collected. And then there was a third one that I hadn't really contemplated, and that is that experience has shown that when we have the amnesty days, there is a substantial amount of abuse that takes place. For example, for tire amnesty days, we have businesses that will claim that they collected the tires off of property when any quick examination of the tires would reflect they had not been out in the woods collecting dirt and leaves and other things like that on it. And so what was really happening is that businesses, and I'm not saying exclusively that, I'm using that as one example, but they were taking advantage of the amnesty day and shifting the cost of their disposal onto the county when it really was intended more for our county residents, not our county businesses to do it. So, and also Supervisor Palmer was able to give me more of the history because she's been involved in this for a number of years, whereas this is just my second year. And so I would report today without a final conclusion that I do not have the optimism nor the excitement that I had when I first raised the question as a possibility. And with that, I see that Supervisor Palmer has turned her camera back on, and I would be more than happy to let her fill in the gaps that I know exist in my report.
Okay, thank you. I would say that the abuse issue isn't across the board. What we're concerned about a little bit is with the tires, but not with necessarily with the other kinds of amnesty days. The other issue, well, there was a variety of issues, and what I was supposed to do is send out some dates to Phil where Donna and I could get together, and I was supposed to do that last week, and oops, I forgot. So I'll have to do that again. But there was an overtime concern. There's already, I guess, and Phil can talk about this much better than I can, but I think he said like 20% of the weekends now are involved in some kind of amnesty day. The question would be, once we got paint, I gave the example of the fact that we had long lines for the household hazardous waste days, for instance. And I believe it came out of this committee, couldn't we do paint all the time? And Ravenna looked at that and said, yes, we can. And now that we're doing paint drop off all the time, the lines are much, much shorter for the household hazardous waste. So we're not totally sure how many more people we'll get if we do have more household hazardous waste days. With respect to electronics, we're not necessarily, we'll fill up the number of people coming, but only a smaller percentage don't show up. I'm not a small percentage, but there is a small percentage that do not show up on that day. So the question is, how much value would there be in running these again? And Ravenna has been very clear, Phil has been very clear that they can do anything we want them to do. It just depends on the cost and issues, but those were some of the things that have come up in the past. And Phil was going to have a conversation with Donna and I about it. And I'm going to do a better job sending out that email so that we can hear from Phil in a little bit more detail and then get back with the committee. And I think I actually went over. So anyway, I'll stop there and do that unless Phil wants to add anything.
Phil, anything to add?
Oh,
No, okay. Thank you both for looking more thoroughly at that, and we'll hope to hear more about it from Phil in the future. Okay, Lance, you're up. We had mentioned last week about potentially expanding leaf collection in the urban ring of the county by kind of piggybacking on the city's program as a pilot or in a small area to see how that might work.
I think that's something that that we could talk to Charlottesville about if and when they get a city manager and a public works director. They actually have a public works director that starts next week. I'll say if you'd asked me a year or two ago, I would say there'd be no chance that they would agree to it because they had a real stressful time, especially if there's any bit of early snow events or extreme weather, of actually making their collections during their scheduled period. And they had, you may have seen those big red old trucks rolling around that were all rusted. Those were 30-year-old trucks that they relied on for the bagged leaf collection. And they were breaking down repeatedly. So that was an additional stress on their ability to get their own work done on time. And not a positive development from 2 years ago is that that work unit has had a lot of frozen field positions. So they are down-staffed. So I really do think it's going to take some steady leadership at all levels for them to be at capacity. But one thing they did was they actually bagged the bagged leaf program, and it's all basically the vacuum, place it on the street program, which is much less expensive equipment and a little bit quicker. So I think that may open up the possibility in the future. What we did with street sweeping, because we know that it's not palatable to them to put, the county's priorities above or even with their own, is that we had them do what work we asked them to do for the street sweeping was done on weekends on an overtime basis, and we paid overtime rates for that. So, I think that would have to be our working assumption. And we would need to figure out just how much work their teams, if they were working, let's say, Saturdays for us, just how much work they could get done. I don't think it would be the entire urban area. And it's hard to pilot something, to think about pilot something when you don't know that it could be expanded. So one option I looked at when I was with Charlottesville, and it was during the between season when we had, we're spending so much money on the red trucks and trying to keep them on board, was I reached out to County Waste to see if they would collect them and, put a special label on the side of the truck, pack them into their compactors and take them to the same place that they're taken to now, up at Panorama Pay Dirt, north of town. And they were happy to. They gave me a proposal, and I put that together as an option for budgets to either replace the trucks or consider that as an option, and a couple of other things. But if we were going, I think that is that sort of option, if we were going to pursue it, would be the more advisable ones in terms of, knowing what you're getting into, having flexibility to expand it, and partners that you can rely on.
Okay,
So I
thank
haven't
you.
given any thought to that at all beyond what I've just said and hearkening back in time.
It's very interesting. I am wondering, does Panorama pay anything for the leaves, or we're just giving them the leaves?
The city pays a minimal fee.
Oh, so the city actually pays Panorama. Panorama doesn't pay for the leaves.
Right, per ton.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's very interesting. The other thing that Lance and Christine and EJ and I had discussed at our weekly meeting was about littering at bus stops, one in particular at Pantops near Dardentown Park. And Teddy Hamilton had actually called me and asked me about this, whether the CAT, the CAT would pick up trash cans at bus stops in areas close. I mean, wouldn't think it would be every bus stop, but I guess the problem arises in bus stops that are near fast food or convenience stores, where people buy something at the store, they wait to get on the bus, and then they have no place to discard it when they get on the bus. And do you know if the CAT has a program for picking up trash at bus stops?
Yeah, I managed CAT for a year back in the day, and bus programs. And the way it's organized inside the city limits is any trash cans that are located on the street, they're mapped. And when formerly County Waste, now GFL, as they do their routine collection routes throughout town, they treat it sort of like another household. They pull over, pull the top, and empty it. So they are removed once a week. And if there was there are stops that were mapped as well, where CAT had the folks who clean the buses at night go on midweek schedule if it was a high volume trash producing route, and make a second pulse, because overflowing could be a problem. So that they themselves are not staffed to actually remove the trash that accumulates at the stops. It's handled just as part of the city's trash collection program. I think the stop that you mentioned was on 20 North, just sort of between 250 and Dardentown, about
or Route 20, I think, right there.
Yeah, it's on the west side, maybe 75 or 100 yards up from 250. I was included on an email string with the executive office and I can't remember who initiated that at the time, but it was a request to add the container and to CAT, and CAT had said, well, we can add the container, but you'll have to collect it. And so I weighed in to say that it's not an established precedent that they wouldn't if it was a container that they provided, and that I thought it was reasonable, since County Waste or GFL serve residents in that same area too, to ask them to collect it, or for CAT to make some accommodation. I got no response to my advice to the executive's office on that, and wasn't looped in on what the solution was. So I don't know if the can was added, if the city agreed to collect, or if say Parks and Recreation was asked to collect it. But to date, if there are trash cans at stops at CAT, they're not picked up if they're on the regular roadside. They probably would be where they exist at shopping centers.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a little problematic unless it's a real sore spot. It's a real problem area to get cans added.
Yeah, I think our expectation is we're designing a sidewalk project now on Commonwealth Drive in a kind of a high density area. It's that's Route 7, which is the backbone of the county's county urban areas route system. We are intending to add pedestrian crossings from this high density apartment complexes to the bus stops and shelters and trash cans and solar powered lights. And so, there is a work group. Diantha McKeel is the primary board rep, I believe, on that, working with CAT and University Transit about service expansions and practical ways to do that, in the county and in the city, collaborative opportunities. So, I think that is a task list as they consider these options. That a thing to add to the task list is a consideration if we're going to be having amenities at places where we know are busy stops and high density or near convenience stores where people might have long waits. That be considered and planned for. And I don't know what it looks like, whether that would fall in the county or CAT, but seems like something that could be worked through.
Okay, thanks very much. Diantha is actually my supervisor. Okay, thanks for the update there. Moving on to planning and vision, Navarre and I spoke, and we realized that we're still waiting to hear about the GBB plan in the new year, and their suggestions. And Lance and EJ are very much, they know that we are eager to hear about that, and we'll be prepared when they can do it, when they can get to it, for the county code updates. And then we are aware, you will all have probably seen in the news, that the comprehensive plan, which was approved in 2015, is going to begin revisions, mostly starting with the zoning and development areas and that sort of thing. But the comprehensive plan has a chapter 12 on facilities, and waste management and sustainable materials management are prominently mentioned in that chapter 12. And the goal is for the comprehensive plan to be updated by 2024. We're going to want to weigh in on that, and we're going to want to look at the objectives that were and strategies that were proposed in 2015. Some of them we've done pretty well on. For example, pharmaceuticals. UVA and Martha Jefferson stepped up so that pharmaceutical disposal isn't a problem in our community anymore, where it was for a long time, where we had rare sort of annual drives for pharmaceuticals. And now you can drop off at Martha Jefferson or UVA almost any day of the week. So that's good, but we should sharpen it toward, our climate goals. So that's what Navarre and I will be working on. And also we'll start talking to you about what's going on in Richmond with new legislation that might impact what we do locally, such as the bag tax last year. That's all I have to say. Jesse, do you want to talk to us about the latest to the operations group? I know you met.
Sure. Yeah, we had a good meeting. Just like a week ago. Anyway, we met with Tom Sire from Strategic Materials. He showed up to our publicly posted meeting, and we had a great conversation about glass. We are going to approach the Glass Packaging Foundation and see if they would look favorably upon a grant request from Nelson County to get the necessary containers for them to start moving glass. It would have to be co-funded by Nelson County, but that's sort of our path forward on that step. Monty's continuing to talk with OI, and we'll see if anything comes out of that partnership as well. It was great getting together and seeing everybody. Got to meet Victoria for the first time, saw Liz and Phil and Sharice. And that brings us around to Sharice. Would you like to do a update on the solid waste plan?
Sure. The update is there is no update. It was sent November 15th. I am still awaiting VDEQ to tell me whether or not they're going to accept it or if I have to make some corrections and send it back. But while I have the floor, I just want to let everyone know that we do have a new TJPDC staff member who will be transitioning into solid waste and recycling. She's not here tonight. She couldn't make it. She will be here for the next meeting. I will be here too. It's going to be a transition, so we're going to be double teaming. Her name is Isabella O'Brien. I will be sending out all of her information. She's a bit overwhelmed right now because she's learning everything, but Isabella O'Brien will be the solid waste and recycling contact person who will be sitting in on these meetings.
Thank you, Sharice. And then Monty, Terry, is there anything you'd like to add around recycling, or sorry, composting in Albemarle County Public Schools?
I don't have anything, Terry.
I do not have anything. I did actually reach out independently to Lindsay. She's Lindsay Check Snoddy. Her, I guess her director or boss is heading out this week. And so we're not going to be able to meet till January, but I'd like to get a little more specifically because we're working with K-Tech and want to get a better handle on their ability to do composting, their ability to make decisions that might have a budget impact. So I'm not sure, Liz or Donna, if you know, like, whether that K-Tech is a function of like the county and the city budget, if it's a line item, I don't know how that works, whether they're how autonomous they are. But I mean, that's a sidebar conversation. If you'd like to shoot me an email, we don't have to go over it here, but that is kind of, I think, the update.
Great. I'm going to propose the next meeting of January 7th, which is Friday after the New Year. And I'm thinking noon at the county office building. We'll keep it quick. It's going to be cold.
There's a possibility that we might be able to go, you might be able to go inside. It's being looked at, and I don't know when the staff will come up with that. Donna might have the latest on that, but it's they're talking about it. Let's put it that way, readying the space of the auditorium, and so it's a possibility.
Yeah, I think that might be a little early. The last I heard was that at our January 5th board meeting, there might be some information brought up, but it might be maybe the next month, but it's all premature at this point.
Hey, Jesse, I'm going to be in Colorado that day, but don't plan around me. You guys can just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Okay. I mean, the only other alternative for me would either be the 6th or try to meet before the holidays. And I think before it's too early. And I don't think you're going to be here the 6th if you're not here the 7th. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So let's shoot for the 7th, and I'll send out an invite, and anybody else who can't make it can decline. And if I get enough declines, we'll reschedule.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. I was just curious, Tom from Strategic Materials, he actually lives in Albemarle County?
That's right. He's a local, and I invited him to this meeting. I don't know if he was able to join at any point, but I look forward to building that relationship.
Yeah, that's wonderful to have him right so close by. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, Christine couldn't be here today. I know that she sent out an email with a poll about the Trex field trip for, she proposed some dates in January and February. So if you haven't seen that email from her and you're interested in going to see how Trex operates their film, takes our post-consumer film and turns it into decking and fence posts and things like that. Go back in your email box and look for Christine's email and respond to the poll, please. And
Peggy, so I have an update on that actually.
great.
So I have contacted Trex about 2 dates, the possibility of 2 dates for us to do a tour. The first choice is January the 14th, and the second choice is February the 4th.
Okay.
So when I hear back which of those 2 dates, if one of those 2 dates work for them, you know, I'll let Christine know.
Oh,
So
great.
polls closed. So
Oh,
you can
okay.
pencil those dates in on your calendar if you're interested in going.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you very much for that update. My bad. And Betsy, I don't know if you have anything you would like to say about the ambassadors program.
Looking for more ambassadors. And probably not going to happen with holidays and cold weather, but we'll keep at it. Some people sound interested, but you know, haven't had them contact us.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our meeting, except for one very important thing. We want to acknowledge and thank Liz Palmer for her service. This is her last meeting with us in her official capacity as a liaison for the board after 8 years on the Board of Supervisors, and I think another 8 years serving on as the liaison to the Ravenna Solid Waste Authority. Liz joined us on the SWAC when we started in 2016, and she's long been an advocate for government's role in ensuring responsible, affordable, transparent disposal of waste and opportunities to recycle and compost. And we're really sorry to see you go. Your can-do attitude and your perseverance have been really valuable to us in advancing sustainable materials management in Albemarle County, from the reconstruction of our transfer station to the additional convenience center facilities for our community at Ivy and now the southern region. And we hope that you deserve a break for sure. You deserve a timeout, but we hope that we'll see your face and have your participation and be able to seek your advice and your institutional knowledge of Albemarle County in the future. And we have a little something for you. I'm sorry you can't all be together in person, but I will bring it by your house. So thank you so much, Liz. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Well, just, you know, we started this actually in 2014 for the Long Range Solutions Committee, which Peggy, you were part of also. And so was Jesse, and I think some other people.
Harry.
Yeah. And I can't remember when Margaret joined, but it was really, really early on. I have to say that this whole group has been one of my favorite groups to interact with. And I've just been so pleased with all the work that everybody's done over the years on this. And I know very well that we could have not gotten what we've done in Ivy without this group. And I've said that before. So for the new people that haven't been around all that time, this committee was instrumental in getting the $3 million transfer station out at Ivy. And it's been, you know, just really pushing forward with the whole design and putting up the, getting our satellite, hopefully getting our satellite units in the future. We've got one that's definitely going to open up next year. So I know that you guys will continue to be involved and successful And certainly you can contact me anytime. I'm not quite sure how much the rest of the Board of Supervisors wants me involved in their world after I leave, but you guys can certainly contact me anytime you want to ask anything at all. And I will be around. So thank you.
Well, thank
Okay.
you, Liz.
All right, well, I think we can adjourn our meeting and see you all in the new year. I can't believe that. So happy holidays to you all, and see you in January.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peggy.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks,